Well, good to get going. So, Lori, why don't we start with you?
Lori.
We'll start on this. Well, ladies first.
Ladies first. Oh.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know the big deal is the budget, but I have to ask about the shutdown. I know you addressed some of that, so tell me what you think. Are there going to be impacts on Wilmot, and if so, what? I don't know if you guys have any grants in the hopper. Just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'm happy to go first on that. So, from a grant financial interaction with Federal Transit Administration, we don't seem to have any concerns at the moment. As Board Member Klein mentioned, FTA staff is actually funded, not out of the general fund. So, I believe they're all still going to be working. And where we are with FTA and some things, we don't envision significant problems. Now, if this lasts for months and months, that's a different ballgame. But hopefully, it doesn't happen. If it's short, I don't think we expect things there. We are going to definitely see an impact starting Monday on ridership. And it's not just federal workers. You know, our whole economy around here supports federal workers too. So that's contractors, consultants, small businesses that rely on them for everything from lunch to dry cleaning to happy hours. There's no question that this is not a good thing for the country, but it's certainly not a good thing for Metro specifically. And the timing is really challenging because ridership is really starting to grow back. So yeah, we're going to be watching this very closely, and we're hoping that if it happens, it's very short, and we can get back to providing great service for our federal government workforce.
And you put out a dollar figure, I thought. Did you mention a dollar figure?
Don't have a dollar figure, Lori. Yeah, I mean, I think, if this lasts for a period of time, we'll be analyzing, and then we'll be able to at least see Smart Trip usage by what used to be, or what would be federal government employees and what obviously dropped. I mean, some employees are still going to work because some people are considered critical not. So it's not a monolithic thing across the federal government, but I think it's inevitable we're going to see certain stations have reduced ridership. There's just no way around it.
Lori, I think that dollar amount you were referring to when the general manager was talking about the inflation rate, drop in inflation is about $1 million. What was it?
Oh, it's 23 million. Oh, yeah. Maybe the part. Oh, I think the part Lori meant. I said was, listen, for every $1 million we use in revenue. I just use that.
Yeah.
And so whether it's 1 or 5 or 10, it doesn't matter. We're going to have to make that up for somebody else. That's just the way it is. So it wasn't a dollar amount related to that. It's just thematically, every dollar fare revenue, where does the money come from?
Yeah, and I mean, the shutdown is obviously going to impact us. But please know our federal delegation in particular has been really strong in working to make sure, they put a lot of work into making sure that the federal government, workers do come back because of the importance of, the functioning of the government, but also what it means to our region and what it means to Metro. So, I hate to see all that work just sort of stop. They've been really working hard toward that.
Yeah. All right.
Not a numbers guy, so can we just flush out a little bit? The three options are essentially borrowing from preventative maintenance, different levels going on into the future, and so that's. Do I have that correct? And then on top of that, the current 3% number, does that need to be raised anyways? Can you give some context in sort of the history of that, where it is now, where you all need it to go? And I know this is a long and involved question, but is there any precedent for metropolitan areas that have multiple large jurisdictions, DC, Maryland, Virginia, I don't know, New York City, where they've had this sort of work collaboratively with a New Jersey and a New York and a Connecticut, or I'm just kind of curious what the basis off which you're going to sort of how you sort of formulate working with these different legislatures
Sure.
into the calendar.
Want me to cue that up and then give a couple?
Yeah, cue it
up. Let's start with the latter. There's no other transit agency that has any type of funding and governance model like us in the world. It's the most complex, and there's not a lot of people that think it actually probably works from a funding model the way in 2023. If you were starting over, you probably wouldn't put this together this way. But neither here nor there. That's what we have. So we have to get. I think as the chair said very eloquently, everyone has to be at the table and everyone has to be contributing to the solution the way the model works. To the first question, I would say the wording is thematically there. Or just the word. I would just tweak the wording, which is we're using our capital debt financing to then kind of use that to pay for operating so we can shift that cost to preventive maintenance. So it's kind of like a double move, but the theme's the same. We are moving in our capital program by using capital dollars to bridge through operating dollars. To the middle ground, I don't know if
Yeah,
you-
so regarding the cap, so I think there's 2 points on that. The first one is, obviously, we've been in a high inflationary period, so a 3% cap has not really addressed what our actual expenses have been, particularly on the labor side. And then the second piece to that is, as we discussed in the presentation, we provided relief to jurisdictions during COVID, about $190 million of relief. That then reset the baseline of what they're paying for the base subsidy, which then has a compounding effect over a 4-year period all the way up to $690 million. So when you look at the deficit, it's been accelerated because of that reset. And that was the right thing for us to do at that time, because there was so much uncertainty around COVID, the local jurisdictions. We weren't running a lot of service. A lot of residents weren't using our system. So that decision was made at that time. But I think what we're trying to demonstrate is how that contributed to the pace of spending down the COVID dollars, the relief funds that we got, and sort of to the fiscal cliff. And so as we enter into this discussion, this period of discussion with our jurisdictional partners, we do want to make that point that we were there for them when they needed us, but now we need them.
And to the 3% question, easy for me, newer, but I think that's the secondary question. The first thing is, how do we solve FY25? Then maybe arguably there should be a conversation around the cap itself. I don't think anyone is suggesting that the cap or the concept of the cap is the problem. But to the finance chair's point, if everything went up 9%, then 3% doesn't work. And so the whole world went up 6, 8, 9, 10% for multiple years in a row. So if you went to Home Depot or you went to buy a fridge or you went to a restaurant, it doesn't matter. Metro can't be held to a different kind of standard in the interim period. Then the conversation is 3% the right mechanism long term? Is it CPIW? That is a secondary conversation that shouldn't get distracted from the immediate issue of FY25. The cap must be the cap must be adjusted in order for the jurisdictions to even put the funding together to keep the budget going.
Yeah, not only adjusted, but longer term, for the sake of the model, just to be indexed to something. That's just the basic fact. It's not indexed to anything, whether it's a regional CPI or some general inflation rate from the Department of Labor. It's just nothing. And as Mr. Letourneau said, you cost and inflation maybe at 9% and you're at 3%. You don't have to be a math major.
Yeah. I think a lot of our challenges come back to that indexing, quite frankly, Chair.
The indexing is the issue.
Take the PREA funding, which we incredibly love the fact that our congressional delegation has gone to bat for Metro. About $150 million, I think it's the first year of PREA was about 2000, maybe 11, something like that.
12.
Obviously, $150 million in the early teens is not $150 million in 2023. Even the dedicated capital funding that everyone worked hard on in 2018 is a set number. So $500 million in 2018 is not in real dollar value the same in 2023. So just indexing alone is really important, because you can't have inflation adjust without the base changing. So those three things alone are a big compounding factor on a lot of things.
I do have a question on that. I just wanted to clarify something on the cap. Has the traditional model been you have your base amount and then it's a 3% increase each year above that base amount to calculate the subsidy? And has I know DC doesn't have a cap, but has it traditionally, they've stayed within that 3%?
Yeah. And so what it is, it's the base can go up to 3%. And there's some legislative exclusions. So a good example of that would be that was purposely designed around Potomac Yard Station opening, Silver Line Phase 2 opening, or if the board does some additional service, that could happen. But that wouldn't account for inflationary growth on the same amount of service. So trying to distinguish.
And because it's a model, we come up with a subsidy. So DC's effectively been at 3% as well, because the rate of growth for the other two jurisdictions is on pace with that.
I wanted to ask if assuming these things have to happen in January with the hiring freeze and the layoff notices, when would a rider, do you have an estimate of when a rider would notice impact? Would it be January? Would it be February, March? When would it likely be?
Yeah, Tom, I'll tell you, that's the thing giving me the most heartburn and the anxiety, quite frankly. That's a little bit of an unknown right now. So to get to a point where we don't have hiring freeze and layoff process starting, we need certainty that the cap and funding will be dealt with. So if the region comes together and gives certainty around that, even before the legislative session's over, I think, I would go back to the board and I think we would get some comfortability around, oh, we're not going to have to enact these draconian measures because even if it takes another 30, 45 days, everyone's in agreement that's where we're going to get to. The further you pull from January 1st with uncertainty, and it could be February, March, it could be April, who knows, then those issues compound quickly because then the hiring freeze happens. We attrit at minimum 50 operations people a month, depending on how you do it. It could be more. So that is an operator in a bus that can't drive a trip, same as on a train, same as a control center, a supervisor. So there's some positions you can kind of get, we need that, but a couple of weeks we can go by. But other positions that day. I also don't have the overtime to backfill those positions because we're also trying to save every single dollar to carry the savings over to next year. So the other part that I'm very concerned about is just how employee morale and people that could retire react to this news, right? So we've really increased, our survey showed employee morale has increased pretty significantly, employee pride in the organization. We're doing really well in delivering a good, safe, frequent, reliable service. But at a certain point, you can't expect someone to come to work every day if they have a cloud over them that they might not have a job in the summer, or that, my wage, I don't get a cost of living adjustment, or someone to get backfilled on my team and I'm working 50 extra hours, a week. So at a certain point, those do matter for just employees coming to work, producing, recruiting people, retaining people. So I don't have a date that February 2nd, but the other problem with this is it will become kind of sporadic impacts because it'll be out of cycle of an operator pick. So as we don't do backfills and we don't do hiring, we're just going to start dropping bus and rail trips as the staffing is available.
So it sounds like wouldn't be immediate, but it would be before July 1st then at some point. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. No, there's no getting around it. Winter into spring, we are going to have degradation of service. The question is how deep and how long it is based on the certainty of the funding question. So I wouldn't expect week 1 in January to have a significant impact, but if we're into March without certainty, there's no getting around it. March is going to be a problematic month, and that's start of our highest, busiest time in the whole year.
And Tom, that's why I mentioned in my remarks, look, it's important, and I really applaud the work the GM and the GR team and others have done to really get out there and talk to people and educate the elected leaders, at the local, state, and federal levels, to really have them understand the issue, the urgency of the issue, and potentially be prepared to take action early enough, or maybe get things presented in these draft budgets prior to the start of these legislative sessions. So we can help maybe avoid some of the dramatic, administrative or operational decisions that Randy's going to have to make. Maybe we could have some sort of sense of how things are going to go to maybe offset some of those, early on. The work is going to continue, obviously, and I think if history teaches us anything, it'll go to the last minute, as it usually does during a legislative session. But, if we could have some sort of sense on where we generally think things are heading, I think would be really, really helpful. And again, getting all the partners to the table, not just the elected leaders, but the business community and other, all of them together prior to the start of these sessions.
Sure.
So we have some sort of general outline or understanding of where we're heading. Would be great.
And there's a serious human factor at place here, right? So if you're moving to this region, as an example, or you live in the region and you're trying to get a new apartment or a home, and one of the first things you do is look at your commute and how you're going to get around. If you don't have certainty around that, that impacts that kind of decision. If you're same as you're taking a new job, where your kid might go to school, where I got to get a doctor for something. If you have uncertainty around how your mobility is going to be impacted, it will impact other decision making. That's on the customer side. Now on the employee side, there's uncertainty around that as well. Just like federal workers that are set up for Monday, it's the same deal. We're our staff. Am I going to have a job? What's going to happen to me? I mean, we should all work to reduce unnecessary anxiety for people that are just trying to come to work or just try to use the system to go about their life, right? There's a human level to this, I think, that has to be remembered.
And we're really just talking about FY25 at this point.
That's right.
So this is kind of a two-step process for them. I think what you saw today was our effort to get us through FY25, but that isn't going to solve our ultimate problem. So we will have a period of discussion that needs to extend. We can get through next year if we get some help from our jurisdictions, but long term we still have to come up with a more permanent funding solution from the region so that we're not into this situation every single year.
For operating and capital.
Can we talk about, I know that there's some efforts at COG, NBTC, are those more focused on this sort of are they more focused on the longer term solution?
A little bit of both. I think the MBTC work in particular is doing some modeling around what that long-term solution would be. Just even from a mechanical perspective, what are the available revenue sources? How can they be used? What do they produce? And Metro itself has done some of that work as well. But I think the COG effort, there's kind of two tracks. There's an elected leaders effort. There's also a chief administrator's officers group. A lot of that at this point is education. We walk into this because we're living it every day, understanding exactly how Metro's funded and exactly what that timeline looks like. We can't expect everybody else in the region to instantly know that. So the efforts over the summer and into the fall have been to really educate that group about that. Talk about sort of what we need. What they want to know from us is what do you need ultimately. And so I think what we did today was kind of crystallize that for the short term, while still making it clear in the long term we need some bigger thinking.
And Laurie, I think it's important to understand that COG is really going to be an important player here and a convener here of the groups and could really play a very key role in helping the region come together to address some of these issues. And what Matt described is just sort of the start of that. And I know that the general manager and others have been talking to the leadership of COG as well, and they're going to hopefully play an important role in bringing people together.
Tom, you want to wrap us up?
Real quick.
All right. One trick.
Are you the one putting all the comments in the Washington Post? Yeah.
Just read it. So I wanted to ask, the numbers look like a dramatic drop, but since they don't count folks who are now going other ways, say they climb the barrier or whatever you saw in my video yesterday, is it really dropping as much as those numbers make it seem, number one? And number two, is this about, because obviously in the short term you're going to spend more money than you recoup, but is this about recouping money in the long term? Is it about safety? Is it about both?
Well, to the latter, it's clearly about both. So there's a public safety aspect of fare evasion. Not everyone agrees with that, but statistically it's incredibly valid. Virtually everyone that commits a serious crime in the system has fare evaded. That doesn't mean, but also that doesn't mean everyone fare evades is going to commit a serious crime, obviously. So there's that part of it. There's bringing orderliness and rules to society. And that's obviously part of what we live in a society. But we also are trying to recap every dollar possible. So, and not just in a fiscal crisis, which we are, but in a normal time, you should be doing that. On the point of accounting, like the video you showed, that is such a small amount of people. So we got some people doing some spot sampling. You need to be physically capable of climbing a 4.5 to 5 foot, wall to do that. I've made this perfectly clear as many times as possible here, but we are never going to be at zero, and I can't stop someone from doing that. There's literally a point where there's a few people that are going to be able to get through. So, we think that there's a little bit of that, maybe, a few here, a few there, but the numbers are overwhelmingly down. And if you went to talk to our station, when I talk to my station managers at all these locations, they're like, what a change. And then everyone's like, can we get them everywhere? That's the number one thing now is station managers and the police. Can you hurry up and get them everywhere? It's making that much of a difference. We're also hearing from some of our partners, like there's some retail establishments, malls and things like that close to some of our stations. They're seeing actual kind of lack of a reduction in bad behavior of, say, the snatch and grab stuff, because they know they can't get into a metro station and jump. So this is a larger public safety kind of component around this. So I think it's starting to come together pretty well. And if we end up at 74% or 82%, hey, both of those numbers are beyond fantastic compared to where we were.
Sorry, one quick one. Your statement the other day, you have continue to express some optimism that this will get worked out. We're going to be talking about, you all have said the words dire, and just, can you just square that circle for me in terms of, y'all have a lot on your plate right now with all of this, and yet you sound like this will get done. What fuels that optimism from you?
Well, one, if you're going to have this job and you're not optimistic, you're going to have a really bad week. So I come into life pretty optimistic. I think our community is a well-educated, a community that cares about sustainability, a community that cares about equity, a community that cares about long-term economic development. I can't rationally get it through my brain that this region would abandon maybe the greatest infrastructure investment in the region. It just, I find that hard to believe that we would open a silver line that took 40 years to build. That Tom did a story the other day that showed the largest increase in international flights of any airport in the country, and the Silver Line being one of those key reasons why. And then a year later, we decide to stop running trains to it. That's what I'm saying. There's why I'm optimistic. Every person I've talked to in the region, regardless from Annapolis to Richmond and to the Wilson Building and everyone in between, all says Metro is needed. We can't have a great future without a healthy Metro. So I've yet to see someone say we don't need Metro and it's not important. Everyone says the opposite. So that's where my optimism is.
And there's not one person that I have met with, or Matt and I have met with, that has not said the same exact thing, regardless of their political affiliation or their fiscal beliefs, philosophy. I mean, everyone understands the investment, and they're not going to walk away from it.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Yep.
Have a great day.
Yep.